The race to be the next Spartanburg County Sheriff is on, and voters will have 9 candidates on their ballots. They include current Deputy Robert Cheeks, former Deputy Andy Clark, current Spartanburg County Coroner Rusty Clevenger, and the list continues. Current Town Councilman in Lyman, Adam Crisp, former Deputy and candidate for Sheriff Nick Duncan, and current Deputy Randy Hollifield. And the rest of the candidates include Spartanburg Police Officer Joseph Pilato, retired State Trooper Bill Rhyne, and retired law enforcement officer at the local and federal levels, Rick Stevens. And you decide soon. Early voting begins July 21st, with Election Day for the primary set for August 5th. And if a runoff race is needed, which is expected with 9 candidates, that election will be held on August 19th. This summer, Spartanburg County, you decide. And one of those candidates is joining us now, Bill Rhyne, retired state trooper. So, Mr. Rhyne, thank you so much for taking some time with us. I like to start these all the same way. Why run for Spartanburg County Sheriff?
Well, you know, I think you and I have talked about this in the past, but I'm a lifelong resident of Spartanburg County. I was born in the northern part of Spartanburg. I moved down to the southern part of Spartanburg County. I've spent basically my entire career, even though I started at the Sheriff's Office and transitioned to the Highway Patrol, a lot of my time with the Highway Patrol was spent in Columbia towards the end of my career. But I've raised my family in Spartanburg County. My grandchildren are likely to be raised in Spartanburg County, and the reality at the end of the day is I just have a vested interest in this county, where this county is going to go. You know, being a lifelong resident there and starting my career at the Sheriff's Office, obviously I always had a desire to potentially end my career there, even though I did retire from the Highway Patrol. And it's just, you know, unfortunate with the circumstances, but it's a unique opportunity, you know, because you have an opportunity to go in there and change how that office functions and how it moves forward.
You've already made waves on the campaign trail, releasing your entire personnel file. Can you promise that was your entire file when it comes to your career?
Sorry about that, 100%. Now, it doesn't have my personnel file from the county, but I went to the county to try and get my personnel file from the county down at the county offices, and they explained to me that, yeah, I don't remember the exact time frame, but after like 2 years it goes to records, and then after so much time your personnel file is purged, and I've been gone 25 years. I left in May of 2000, so I even went to try and retrieve those to have those put out there, but the only thing I had, and when I requested my personnel file from the Highway Patrol, my purpose and the way I requested it was as a redacted version, and it came in a shared file. That shared file cannot be changed in any way, shape, or form. It came directly from the FOIA office, so that's what was provided and that's what was posted.
Why did you do it?
You know, people are screaming for transparency, and that's at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You know, people throughout the county keep saying, and every time you see an election cycle, it doesn't matter what office somebody is running for, whether it's a House seat, a Senate seat, on a local or on a federal level. Even when you start talking about the president, you hear them say transparency, transparency, transparency. And the reality is then they get into office, and do we actually see transparency? So as a candidate, how can I show the public, how can I show the people that this is what you're going to get? And like I've said, transparency is only a word until you put it into action. And the greatest way to see a person's career and see what their career has been made of is through that personnel file, because it breaks down every performance review that you've ever gotten, any disciplinary that you've ever gotten. You know, you have an opportunity, and it really serves a couple other purposes. Number one, it's showing them exactly what your career's been made of, what you've done. But then I think better than that, especially with circumstances that we're dealing with in the county, it lets people know, number one, you're not going to bring any ill repute on the county. You're not going to bring any ill repute on the agency, and you're not going to bring any ill repute on the state of South Carolina, because you've got a 25-year career to show this is what I've done, this is my body of work, and this is what I'm bringing to the Sheriff's Office.
So what will you bring to the Sheriff's Office when it comes to transparency? You said you're showing it here on the campaign trail, but if you are elected sheriff, what will transparency look like for Sheriff Rhyne?
Well, right out of the gate, one of the things, and it's in my platforms, if you go on my website and you look at it, one of the things that I've said, and I've talked with some others about this because I didn't know if it was actually possible, and originally what I wanted to do was have a rolling budget on our website that would actually be on the website. People could click on the budget. But when I started really studying and looking at it, the reality is the budget is kind of fluid. There's times that the budget could go down, but then there could be, you know, monies that came back. So it could end up showing a case of impropriety, and that's not what I wanted to do. So what I decided to do was each quarter is to come out and put our budget where we're at for the year, because it's the people's money anyway. It's the taxpayers' money, and they have a right to know exactly where that money is going. So per quarter, we will put that up there as a line item by line item so they know where it's at. The next part of that is, doing an audit report at the end of the year. So let's say 26 into 27. When we get to the end of 2026, by March 31st of 2027, we're going to put an audit report out that basically is like a report card for every division of the sheriff's office. It kind of gives you where our successes are and where we need to make improvements within the office. Not only is it going to have areas that we need to make improvements, but it's going to have ideas on what our goals are going to be on how we improve on these things and how we get better. And it's just another way of showing them this is what we're doing. This is how we're performing as your office, and people deserve to know that.
You spent a long time with the Highway Patrol.
Yes.
Over 20 years. What would be your response to some who may have concerns that you might have not been part of investigations like police or the sheriff's office? Instead, you're with Highway Patrol. And so when it comes to that experience, what would be your response to maybe some deputies who would have that concern?
Well, you know, we might not have been involved in the investigations at the level that they are, but remember, we're still doing investigations. We have accidents where people are leaving the scene that take immense amount of work with other law enforcement agencies and working with one another and partnering with one another. But the biggest thing that I tell people that look at that when they're looking at how does a person come in there from the Highway Patrol specifically, you know, one of the things that I think that I bring are those checks and balances that you see on a statewide level. But when you look across the state of South Carolina right now, we have 4 sheriffs in this state that are former highway patrolmen, and they are extremely successful. They run extremely successful agencies. And they have come into those agencies and taken what they've learned through their career at the Highway Patrol, been able to apply that with those agencies, and they've seen great success. You'll often hear me say, you know, as a sheriff, you function more as a CEO. It's the people that you put around you that are going to be your successes. There's a saying out there. I just heard it recently when I was in a life group at church, and they said, you know, a CEO doesn't have to have a 4.0. What they have to have is the people around them that have a great understanding, because your success is not going to be based on your knowledge. Your success is going to be based on the people that you have around you that are assisting you with those decisions.
Talk about the people around you. A lot of questions are people are asking, what will your command staff look like? Do you have people in place where you want to make sure that you have that command staff, that people can trust you have the right people around you?
Yes. So I have vetted many different people and talked to them about command staff positions, but ethically, it would be irresponsible for me to identify any of those, because a lot of those are actively in law enforcement positions right now. And certainly if I did not win the election, it could put them in a position of vulnerability as a result of me identifying who they are. So it's not ethically responsible. I think one of the big concerns that they have, and I've seen this through social media posts, is, you know, I've even seen it said is we're not concerned about the sheriff as much as we're concerned about the command staff, because the command staff is who's really making those decisions. Well, that's misrepresented, because they don't understand how my organization will work if I am elected sheriff. You know, I don't believe in individual leadership. I believe in collective leadership. I believe in the sheriff working with their chief deputies and all of their captains collectively to make a decision on how the agency is going to move forward. And I believe communication is extremely important with that. And I think communication has to come from the sheriff all the way down through emails and other communication within the office. And then when you have that, and you have those other people that are involved as far as your command staff are concerned, when you as the sheriff have provided that information to those people and you've kept that open line of communication, because if you don't keep that open line of communication, let's be honest, when there is a misunderstanding, it breeds mistrust. When there's mistrust in the agency, it breeds empathy. When we breed empathy, then we start having retention and attrition rate problems at that point in time, because they feel like nobody is communicating with them. I want to be able to communicate from myself all the way down to the lowest level. So when they're getting that information coming from the command staff, they know this information is accurate. If not, then I'm not saying that they need to question the command staff in a way, but they could certainly ask that that's not what we understood that the sheriff said at that point in time. And clear and open communication is paramount in an agency that large. If you do not have it, you're definitely going to breed that mistrust, and you're going to breed that misunderstanding.
The interim sheriff, Jeff Stevens, has ended Rolling Thunder. Would you bring it back, or will you keep it ended?
No, I would not bring Rolling Thunder back. I think there's just too many civil liabilities out there, and when you start looking at the amount of money that is spent with Rolling Thunder on a year-to-year basis when it comes in, and the money that's being put in that, it's more fiscally responsible for me to take that, or us to take that money and put it into other areas. There's other ways of doing that, you know. And I've said this time and time again, the reality is this, that the people that we're getting out there on those interstates, that we're stopping out there on those interstates, as soon as Rolling Thunder starts, they know about it. They have a communication network, and they're going to be getting around that. They're going to be finding alternative routes to get where it is that they're going. You know, it would be much better, and it'd be a lot less liability if we had a dedicated team that was out there throughout the year doing that type of interdiction work and getting those drugs off our roads.
I think lastly here, what's your promise to voters of Spartanburg County?
You know, my biggest promise to all the voters at the end of the day is, you know, I can't promise them that I'm never going to make a mistake. I can't promise them we're going to make mistakes, but we're going to learn from those mistakes. And as we learn from those mistakes, we're going to grow and we're going to get better. But the one promise that I can make to every voter of Spartanburg County, I'll never make a bad choice. You know, I have what I call my 4 deadly sins, and everybody who's ever worked with me under my leadership has heard them. And I tell them, you know, never lie to me, never break the law, never do anything that brings any ill repute on the agency, and never do anything that affects the people we serve. And I live by those. Those 4 statements basically can encompass an entire policy manual for what young people especially, and all people within the sheriff's office, should be guided by. But the reality is, a mistake is one thing. Those are all choices. You've made choices with those, and that's something that we're going to stand by, and we're going to make sure if they make those choices that they're going to have to answer for those choices, and we're going to hold people accountable, but at the same time we're going to support them. We're going to come along beside them. My leadership's servant leadership, and that servant leadership is going to be to work with the men and the women, but collectively work together for the people of Spartanburg County.
All right, Bill Rhyne, candidate for Spartanburg County Sheriff. Mr. Rhyne, thank you.
Thank you.